A large portion of the Jewish nation has returned to its homeland, but the heart, soul, and mind of much of the Jewish nation are still in exile mode. This state of affairs must and will inevitably change. This is Torah Nation TV from Jerusalem, and we are speaking with the head of Machon Shilo, Rabbi David Bar-Hayim. Shalom, Rabbi Bar-Hayim.
Shalom.
A viewer asks the following: why should I say the bracha Shelo Assani Aved that Hashem did not make me a slave, when nowadays slavery is not a reality in our society?
I was asked this question actually a number of years ago, and I wrote an halachic response in which I made the following points. I agree that in our present reality, to say the bracha Shelo Assani Aved, thanking Hashem for not making one a slave, is not appropriate, and very possibly a bracha levatala. Because the bracha, this bracha which appears, as I will explain in a moment, for the first time in the Talmud Bavli, at that time, the reality of avadim k'na'aniyim, that is to say, people who were both purchased as slaves, as servants, and were also converted to Judaism, this reality was a very common one, and therefore it made perfect sense to make such a bracha, to thank Hashem for not being a person of that type who is not required to perform all the miswoth. And we thank Hashem for the miswoth that we perform. And when we are able or commanded to perform fewer miswoth, when we are obligated to do fewer miswoth, we find this not a relief, but rather we find this unfortunate. And therefore we thank Hashem. So an Aved is someone who is required to perform fewer miswoth, and this is considered less desirable than being a fully fledged Jew in the full sense of the word, and in other words, a person who is required to perform all the positive miswoth. I agree, therefore, that to recite this bracha today, Shelo Assani Aved, is a mistake. That is point number one. The second point is that the three barachot that we recite every day, Shelo Assani Roy or Nukhri, for not having made me a Gentile, which has to do with the connection to Hashem and to the Torah, which a Gentile does not possess, and Shelo Assani Isha, for not having made me a woman, which also has to do with the number of misvot that a woman is obligated to perform. As the Talmud explains, that this is the reason that we make this bracha, because a woman is not required to perform all the misvot that a man is required to perform, and this we consider to be a great zechut, something of great merit, and something that we are pleased about. And the third is Shelo Assani Vur. We will explain this term bur in a moment. These three barachot appear in a baraitha which is recorded in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, the famous Tana Rabbi Yehuda. This is how it appears in all the accurate sources, a majority of the manuscripts of the Gemara Masechet Menahoth 43b Mem Gimel Amud Beth in the Talmud Bavli, and all the Rishonim and all the Geonim recorded as being stated by Rabbi Yehuda. This is an important point to note. Not as it appears in Tfus Vilna, in the Vilna edition, recorded in the name of Rabbi Meir. This is relevant for another related discussion, which we won't touch upon today. At any rate, we have a baraitha, which Rabbi Yehuda states, which is not challenged or contested by anybody in the Talmud Bavli or in the Talmud Yerushalmi or any source that we have before us. In other words, it cannot be claimed that this is only the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. If that were the case, then the Talmud would have stated that Tenach Rabbi Yehuda or Hanich la Rabbi Yehuda, this is perhaps the view of Rabbi Yehuda, but others say it differently. There is no such statement in the Talmud Bavli. No one challenges or questions this bracha, which means that at least from the time of Rabbi Yehuda onwards, this bracha was recited by all Jews, all the Chachamim, and all the Jews who followed the teachings of the Chachamim. It's also very possible, in fact likely, that this bracha was in place and recited daily by Jews and all the sages well before the time of Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yehuda, is the Chacham in whose name this statement, this halakha, was recorded, which is the case with many halachot, that the halakha precedes the Chacham who stated it, and he was relating an ancient tradition that was known to many and practiced by all or by many of the Chachamim and their followers. But for whatever reason, it became associated particularly with his name. At any rate, it was certainly from the time of Rabbi Yehuda that this bracha was stated, and no one questioned it. And then we find, surprisingly, in the Talmud Bavli, Masechet Menachot, Mem Gimel Amud Bet 43b, we find that in Amora, about 200 odd years later, Rav Aha Bar Yaakov, it says that he heard his son reciting this bracha, this third bracha, Shelo Assani Vur, and he was displeased. Now we have to understand the term bur refers to a person who is bereft of any knowledge of Torah, and therefore also does not practice many of the aspects of the Torah. Certainly a bur is not someone who knows what the Chachamim, what the sages say, what they teach, and certainly does not practice what they teach. And it's difficult to imagine that Rav Aha Bar Yaakov's son was such a person. And yet we find in the Gemara that Rav Aha Bar Yaakov hears his son say the bracha Shelo Assani Vur, and he questions him, and he says, Kulei hai nameh, why should you say such a thing? In other words, is it not perhaps an indication of conceit on your part? Are you sure that you're not a bur, and therefore you can say this bracha? To which his son replied, what should then I say? What would you have me say? Should I say Shelo Assani Aved? Would you like me to say the bracha instead for not having made, thank you Hashem for not having made me a slave? That's equivalent to saying Shelo Assani Isha, because I already made that bracha, and the equivalence is the fact that both of them are patur, both are exempt from the same types of misvot. To which Rav Aha Bar Yaakov replies that the level or the status of a slave is much lower than that of a woman, and therefore this is not a fair comparison, and therefore he suggests that he should say Shelo Assani Aved. So what we have before us is a very unusual case where an Amora, that is to say a Chacham of a later generation, questions a standard, well-accepted, normative halacha, which had been around for centuries, at least 200 years, as I say, probably longer, that had never been contested or questioned by anyone at all. And all of a sudden, Rabbi Bar Yaakov finds some fault with this bracha and tells his son, do not say Shelo Assani Vur, which is what Rabbi Yehuda said to say, which is what all the Chachamim were saying and practicing for centuries. Rather, I suggest we come up with a new bracha, which we are now going to invent, so to speak, Shelo Assani Aved, a bracha that was not mentioned anywhere in any text before that time. That's what you should say instead of Shelo Assani Vur. I, for one, have never ever understood this Gemara. I have asked many Talmidei Chachamim, many rabbis, to perhaps offer an explanation. I've never heard any reasonable explanation. It does not fit any of the standard patterns with which we are familiar. For example, the rule of thumb that an Amora does not disagree with a Tana, that a latter authority in the time of the Amoraim did not disagree with an earlier authority from Eretz Yisrael from the time of the Mishnah, from the time of the Tanaim. Here this example seems to fly in the face of that convention. On top of that, the logic, the claim of Rav Aha Bar Yaakov does not make any sense. B'mechilat kevodo, it does not make any sense. It is most unlikely, to put it mildly, that his son was a bur, because the definition of a bur, as we see at the end of the first chapter of the Mishnah, Masechet Kiddushin, a bur is someone who has studied not even Tanakh and Mishnah, let alone something more advanced. To suggest that his son was someone who had never studied Tanakh, lo Mikra, lo Mishnah, someone who knew nothing at all, a total ignoramus, and therefore also a person who did not perform the normal halachic practices of normal average Jews, this does not seem at all possible. It's quite incredible. How therefore could he have said to his son, how do you know you're not a bur? Obviously any person who wishes to perform the mitzvah, the instruction of the Chachamim, to say this bracha, that by itself proves and defines this person as not being a bur, because a bur does not even know that the Chachamim made such a statement, and a bur couldn't care less whether he makes the bracha or not, even if he had heard about it. Whereas Rav Aha Bar Yaakov's son wanted to make the bracha, and in fact said the bracha, and when he was asked by his father, why do you say this bracha? Are you sure you're not such a person, such a bur? He responded with a very intelligent question. He said, what would you want me to say? Instead, we have to say 3. Rabbi Yehuda speaks about 3 brachot in the morning. Should I replace it with something like Shelo Assani Aved, which is a very correct, intelligent question, which proves that he wasn't a bur at all. So the entire Gemara has, to my mind, always been a great mystery. And therefore, for many years, I have not said this bracha Shelo Assani Aved. Instead, I have said the bracha Shelo Assani Vur, which is the bracha as it appears. It's an original form. It appears in the Tosefta, in Masechet Berachot. It appears in the Talmud Yerushalmi, and it appears also in the Talmud Bavli, and that's the version quoted by the Talmud Bavli, until Rabbi Bar Yaakov suggests that it be changed. And all of Chachmei Israel, as we said, for centuries, agreed. The fact that the Talmud Bavli, for whatever reason, seems to accept this inexplicable and incomprehensible suggestion of Rabbi Bar Yaakov is what resulted in the fact that this is the bracha that you find today in Sidurim. And therefore we find that Rav Amram Gaon writes in his Sidur against those who continue to say the bracha Shelo Assani Vur, which proves that in the late 8th century or early 9th century, this bracha was still commonly said in many parts of the Jewish world. Even more interestingly, this bracha is also mentioned by Rabbi David Kochavi from Provence, the south of France, in the 14th century. And he also refers to people who still in his day recite the bracha Shelo Assani Vur and not Shelo Assani Aved, and he reproaches them as well. My point is that this bracha continued to be said by many Jews apparently in many different communities for many, many centuries, not even so terribly distant from our own time apparently. And to me it seems that both for the reasons that we have explained with regards to the sugya itself in the Talmud and due to the fact that this mitziut, this reality of avdut, of slavery, is not a common one at all, to put it mildly, in our day. For all these reasons, it seems to me that to make the bracha Shelo Assani Aved today is a mistake, and the proper bracha is to say Shelo Assani Vur.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.